Christmas on the plantation was not the season of joy we imagine today. For 4 million enslaved people across the American South, December 25th brought a complex mix of rare indulgences and painful reminders of their bondage. Today, we are exploring the real Christmas meals that sustained enslaved families, dishes born from scraps, creativity, and an unbreakable will to find celebration even in the darkest circumstances. These were not just meals, they were acts of resistance, cultural preservation, and profound human dignity. The reality of plantation Christmas was stark. Picture this. While plantation owners feasted on roasted turkey, ham, and elaborate desserts, enslaved families gathered around single pots, transforming discarded scraps into something approaching celebration. The irony was stark. The very people who grew, harvested, and prepared the South's abundant crops received only the leftovers, the unwanted parts, the cheapest ingredients. Yet, from these limitations came remarkable culinary creativity that would influence American cuisine for generations. The enslaved community developed an entire food culture based on making the most of what others considered worthless. They turned necessity into art, survival into celebration, and scraps into sustenance that nourished both body and soul. The plantation system was designed to provide enslaved people with the absolute minimum needed for survival. Weekly rations typically consisted of cornmeal, salt pork or fatback, and molasses. Occasionally, there might be rice, sweet potatoes, or vegetables from small garden plots that enslaved families were permitted to tend during their few free hours. But Christmas brought slight variations to this monotonous diet, sometimes an extra piece of meat, a bit more molasses, or permission to hunt and fish. These small allowances were not acts of kindness. They were calculated decisions by slaveholders who understood that completely broken spirits produce less profitable labor. The Christmas generosity was another form of control, a way to provide just enough hope to prevent despair while maintaining the fundamental brutality of the system. Possum and sweet potatoes, Christmas Eve tradition. Possum and sweet potatoes were among the most anticipated Christmas dishes. This wasn't just about food, it was about freedom. Christmas was one of the few times enslaved men could hunt without supervision, heading into the December woods with torches and dogs on Christmas Eve. The hunt itself was a ritual of temporary liberation. Fathers and sons moved through moonlit forests, following trails and reading signs that connected them to ancestral knowledge of the land. The skills required, tracking patience, understanding animal behavior, were the same skills their African ancestors had used for millennia. In those dark woods, away from the overseer's eyes, enslaved men could feel something approaching autonomy. The possum was cleaned with meticulous care, soaked overnight in salted water to remove any gamey flavor, then roasted slowly with sweet potatoes tucked around the edges. The meat turned tender and slightly sweet from the animal's diet of persimmons, while the potatoes absorbed the rich drippings until caramelized and golden. This dish represented both the pain of bondage and the resilience of people who created celebration from the margins. It was wild game transformed into a feast that carried memory, hope, and quiet defiance against a system designed to strip away every dignity. The very act of hunting represented a small victory, food that slaveholders had not provided, protein earned through skill and knowledge, rather than received as rations. Sweet potatoes came from small garden plots that enslaved families tended after their required labor was finished. These plots, sometimes called truck patches, were crucial sources of supplemental nutrition and represented one of the few areas where enslaved people could exercise some control over their lives. The vegetables they grew, sweet potatoes, collards, okra, and peanuts, often reflected African agricultural traditions adapted to American soil. Hog jowl and black-eyed peas, hope in a bowl. The combination of hog jowl and black-eyed peas carries deep meaning that extends far beyond Christmas. The jowl, fatty cheek meat considered undesirable by wealthy families, was treasured in the quarters for its rich flavor and ability to season large pots. Black-eyed peas simmered slowly with the jowl until creamy and infused with smoky, salty essence. This combination became associated with luck and prosperity, beliefs enslaved people held fiercely despite their circumstances. The tradition of eating black-eyed peas for good fortune came directly from West African customs, where cowpeas were considered symbols of abundance and fertility. One hog jowl could flavor enough peas to feed an entire cabin, stretching limited rations further than seemed possible. Women woke before dawn on Christmas morning to start the pot, knowing it needed hours to reach perfection. The slow cooking process was itself a form of meditation, a time for reflection and prayer while the aromatic steam filled small cabins. The preparation was communal. Women from neighboring cabins would gather, sharing the work of sorting peas, removing stones, and tending the fire. These gatherings were opportunities for conversation, storytelling, and the passing down of knowledge from older to younger generations. Recipes were not written down. They lived in memory and muscle, passed through demonstration and repetition. This dish was more than sustenance. It was an act of hope, a belief that better days might come despite all evidence to the contrary. The very act of preparing food with care and attention was a declaration of humanity, a refusal to be reduced to mere labor units. Each spoonful contained not just nutrition, but cultural memory, community bonds, and stubborn optimism. The black-eyed peas themselves told a story of survival and adaptation. Originally from Africa, they had traveled the Middle Passage in the holds of slave ships, sometimes hidden in the hair of enslaved women who understood their value as both food and seed. In American soil, they thrived, becoming a crucial protein source and a living connection to ancestral homelands. Crackling bread, children's Christmas joy. Crackling bread transformed hog butchering scraps into something children waited for all year. When slaveholders slaughtered hogs in December, rendered fat left behind crispy bits of skin called cracklings. These golden, crunchy pieces were mixed into cornmeal batter and baked into bread that snapped with each bite. The bread was dense and satisfying, with pockets of salty, porky flavor throughout the golden crumb. Enslaved families considered crackling bread special because cracklings were only available during winter butchering season. The timing wasn't coincidental. December was when hogs reached their peak weight, and the cold weather allowed for proper preservation of meat. Mothers saved the best pieces, hiding them until enough had been collected for a proper batch. This required careful planning and patience, qualities that enslaved women developed out of necessity. Every scrap had to be accounted for, every ingredient maximized for its potential. The aroma of crackling bread baking filled small cabins with warmth and anticipation, signaling the holiday had arrived. Children would hover near the fire, watching for signs that the bread was ready, their mouths watering at the smell of corn and pork mingling in the heat. This simple bread carried enormous emotional weight, a reminder that even within slavery's brutal system, moments of sweetness could be created from scraps others discarded without thought. The bread represented transformation, the ability to take something worthless and make it precious through skill and care. The technique of making crackling bread required knowledge passed down through generations. The proper ratio of cracklings to cornmeal, the right temperature for baking, the timing that ensured a crispy exterior and a tender interior, all of this lived in the hands and memory of enslaved cooks who had learned from their mothers and grandmothers. Chitlins with hot pepper vinegar, turning waste into treasure. Perhaps no dish better exemplifies the transformation of discarded scraps into treasured food than chitlins with hot pepper vinegar. Chitlins, cleaned hog intestines, were given to enslaved workers after butchering because white families refused them, considering them disgusting and unfit for human consumption. The cleaning process was intensive, requiring multiple soakings in cold water, scrubbing, and careful preparation that could take an entire day. This was not work that could be rushed, and properly cleaned chitlins could be dangerous to eat. The process required skill, patience, and knowledge, passed down through generations of women who understood the techniques necessary to transform these discarded organs into safe, delicious food. Once cleaned, chitlins boiled for hours until tender, filling the air with their distinctive aroma. They were then served with vinegar spiked with hot peppers that cut through the richness and added a bright, sharp flavor that complemented the mild taste of the intestines. The powerful, distinctive smell filled quarters and announced the holiday. Some found it offensive, but for those who grew up with it, the smell meant celebration, family gathering, and the triumph of making something wonderful from what others had thrown away. Preparing chitlins was communal, with women gathering to clean and cook while sharing stories and songs. These gatherings were opportunities for bonding, for passing down not just cooking techniques, but cultural knowledge, family histories, and survival strategies. The work was tedious, but the company made it bearable, even enjoyable. The dish carried African roots, connecting enslaved people to foodways their ancestors practiced before the Middle Passage. In West Africa, no part of an animal was wasted. Intestines, organs, and other parts that Europeans considered inedible were transformed into delicious, nutritious dishes through careful preparation and seasoning. Eating chitlins at Christmas became an act of cultural preservation, a way of maintaining identity and community bonds that slavery sought to destroy. Each bite was a connection to ancestral knowledge, a declaration that African foodways would survive despite attempts to erase them. Sweet potato pone, a dessert from the garden. Sweet potato pone was a Christmas dessert requiring nothing more than sweet potatoes, molasses, and knowledge passed from mother to daughter across generations. This dish represented one of the few areas where enslaved people could exercise creativity and control, using ingredients they had grown and harvested themselves. Potatoes were roasted until soft, their skins charred, and their flesh transformed into orange silk. The roasting process concentrated the natural sugars, making the potatoes intensely sweet and flavorful. They were then mashed smooth, mixed with molasses, a little lard for richness, and spices like ginger when available. The mixture was pressed into a pan and baked slowly until set into a dense, sweet cake that could be sliced and eaten cold over several days. The texture fell somewhere between pudding and candy, smooth and sticky with concentrated sweetness that made children's eyes go wide with delight. Sweet potatoes grew well in small plots. Enslaved families were sometimes permitted to tend, making them one of the few ingredients people could control from planting to harvest. These garden plots were crucial sources of both nutrition and autonomy, representing small spaces where enslaved people could make decisions about what to grow and how to tend their crops. The pone represented agency, a dish made entirely from ingredients grown and prepared by enslaved hands without slaveholder involvement. Every step of the process, from planting the sweet potato slips to serving the finished dessert, was controlled by the enslaved community. Families made extra pones to share with neighbors, spreading Christmas joy through food when no other gifts were possible. This sharing was crucial to community survival. It ensured that everyone had something special for the holiday, regardless of their individual circumstances. The recipe itself was a form of cultural transmission. Mothers taught daughters not just the ingredients and techniques, but the stories and memories associated with the dish. Each pone carried forward the knowledge and love of previous generations. Pot liquor and cornbread, humble nourishment. Perhaps the most humble Christmas meal was pot liquor with cornbread, yet it nourished bodies and spirits when nothing else was available. Pot liquor was the cooking water left after boiling greens, collards, turnips, or whatever could be gathered from winter gardens. This broth contained vitamins and minerals leached during cooking, making it genuinely nutritious, despite appearing to be mere vegetable water. Modern nutritional science has confirmed what enslaved people knew instinctively, that pot liquor was rich in vitamins A, C, and K, as well as folate, calcium, and iron. Enslaved families sipped warm liquor from cups, using cornbread to soak up every drop. The flavor was earthy and green, slightly bitter, but satisfying on cold December nights when cabin walls let in the wind. The warmth was as important as the nutrition, providing comfort and sustenance when fuel for heating was scarce. On Christmas, pot liquor might be richer, made from greens cooked with a bit of fat back if rations allowed. The addition of pork fat transformed the simple broth into something more substantial, adding calories and flavor that made the meal feel more festive. Mothers ensured every child received their share, knowing the liquor would ward off winter sickness. This wasn't superstition. The vitamins in pot liquor genuinely helped prevent scurvy and other nutritional deficiencies that were common among people with limited diets. This dish taught an essential lesson, that nothing should be wasted, that nourishment existed even in what appeared to be scraps. This philosophy of waste-nothing cooking became central to African American cuisine and represented a form of resistance against a system that provided so little. Peanut stew, African memories in American pots. Peanut stew was a dish with direct African roots brought across the Atlantic in the memories of enslaved people who recreated homeland cooking with American ingredients. This dish represented one of the strongest connections to pre-slavery foodways, a direct link to the sophisticated cuisines of West and Central Africa. Peanuts, called ground nuts or goobers, grew easily in southern soil and were sometimes permitted in small garden plots. The cultivation of peanuts represented both continuity and adaptation. Enslaved people brought knowledge of how to grow and prepare these legumes from Africa, then adapted their techniques to American conditions. The nuts were roasted to develop their flavor, shelled by hand during long winter evenings when families gathered around fires, and ground into paste using whatever tools were available. This paste formed the base of a thick, satisfying stew that could stretch small amounts of meat or vegetables into filling meals. Root vegetables, greens, and whatever meat scraps were available joined the pot, simmering until everything melted into rich, nutty warmth. The cooking process was slow and meditative, requiring constant stirring to prevent the peanut paste from burning and careful attention to achieve the proper consistency. The flavor was unlike anything in European cooking, earthy and complex with a creamy texture coating the tongue. For enslaved people who remembered African foods, this stew was a taste of home, a connection to mothers and grandmothers who had prepared similar dishes in villages across the Atlantic. At Christmas, peanut stew might include extra ingredients or be prepared with special care. Families might add more vegetables from their garden plots or include small pieces of meat if any were available. The extra attention given to holiday preparation made the stew feel special, even when the ingredients remained humble. The dish represented cultural survival, proof that enslaved people maintained connections to African foodways despite every attempt to erase their heritage. Each bowl contained not just nourishment, but memory and quiet resistance against cultural annihilation. Okra soup connected enslaved people directly to West African foodways, where okra had been cultivated and cooked for centuries before the Middle Passage. The vegetable itself was a living link to ancestral homelands, brought to America in slave ships and cultivated in plantation gardens. The vegetable grew well in southern heat and was dried for winter use, the pods strung on thread and hung from cabin rafters like green beads. This preservation technique ensured that okra would be available during the cold months when fresh vegetables were scarce. Reconstituted in water, the okra released its characteristic thick, silky texture that gave body to soups and stews. This natural thickening property made okra invaluable in a cuisine that had to stretch small amounts of ingredients into filling meals. Combined with whatever meat or fish was available, onions, and pepper, the soup became warming sustenance on cold December nights. The preparation was flexible. Cooks could add whatever vegetables were available, adjust seasonings based on what they had, and vary the thickness depending on how much okra they used. The distinctive texture, slippery and substantial, was beloved by those who grew up with it and sometimes strange to others. That texture was central to many West African dishes, and its preservation in American cooking represented cultural continuity across the trauma of slavery. At Christmas, okra soup might be richer than usual, made with more meat, or served in larger portions. Families might add extra vegetables from their winter stores or season it more heavily if spices were available. The dish represented cultural continuity, proof that African cooking traditions survived despite slavery's attempts to erase identity. Each bowl was an act of remembrance and resistance, a way of maintaining connection to ancestral foodways that predated slavery by thousands of years. The deeper meaning. These Christmas meals tell a story far more complex than simple sustenance. They reveal the incredible resilience of the human spirit, the power of cultural memory, and the ways people create meaning and celebration even under the most oppressive circumstances. Every dish was an act of resistance. Every shared meal was a declaration of humanity. Every recipe passed down was a victory against a system designed to erase identity and culture. The very act of taking time to prepare food with care, to gather families around shared pots, to create something beautiful from scraps, was a form of rebellion against dehumanization. These foods also revealed the profound irony of American slavery. The very people who produced the South's agricultural wealth, who planted, tended, and harvested the crops that made plantation owners rich, received only scraps and leftovers. Yet from these scraps, they created a cuisine that would profoundly influence American cooking for generations to come. The creativity required to transform waste into nourishment, to find flavor in the cheapest ingredients, to create celebration from almost nothing became the foundation of what we now recognize as Southern cuisine. Many of the techniques, flavor combinations, and dishes that define American regional cooking originated in the quarters created by enslaved cooks who had to make something from nothing. Legacy and remembrance. Many of these dishes evolved into beloved staples of Southern and African American cuisine: black-eyed peas on New Year's Day, chitlins at family gatherings, sweet potato pie at holidays, crackling bread at church suppers. These foods carry forward the creativity and resilience of enslaved ancestors. But we must remember their origins. These were not quaint folk recipes or charming regional dishes. They were survival foods, created by people who transformed the worst circumstances into something approaching celebration through sheer force of will and cultural memory. The Christmas meals of enslaved people remind us that the human capacity for hope, creativity, and community cannot be destroyed, even by the most brutal systems. In transforming scraps into feasts, in gathering around shared pots, in passing down recipes and techniques, enslaved families maintained their humanity and dignity. These meals were acts of love, parents ensuring their children had something special, communities sharing what little they had, grandmothers teaching skills that would ensure survival. They were also acts of resistance, refusals to be broken, determinations to maintain culture and identity, despite systematic attempts at erasure. As we remember these stories, we honor not just the food, but the people who created it. We acknowledge the profound injustice of slavery while celebrating the unbreakable spirit of those who endured it. Their Christmas meals were more than food. They were hope served on wooden plates, love ladled from iron pots, and freedom found in the simple act of transforming nothing into something worth sharing. These stories matter. These recipes matter. The people who created them matter. In remembering their Christmas meals, we remember their humanity, their creativity, and their unbreakable will to find light in the darkest of times.